The glaciers are retreating, the deserts are spreading. Throughout the world, this change has dramatically increased over the last 50 years. China is in danger. The ancient deserts, which appeared long ago in the north of the country, continue to grow. New deserts are forming. Arid and semi-arid zones now cover half the country. They are taking over the arable and inhabited land, which, near the deserts, is shrinking dramatically.
I saw a very high wall of sand coming towards me. According to studies, more than 1,300,000 tons of sand dust fell on Beijing in 2010.
There are not enough natural barriers of vegetation at the edges of the deserts, nor are they strong enough to hold back the sand. The plants lack water and are dying.
Water is important in the fight against desertification. We fire into the clouds to bring artificial rain to arid zones.
An army of 32,000 rainmakers fight at the front every day. A green wall is being built, as long as the Great Wall of China, to keep the enemy at bay. China is at war against desertification that threatens to devour the land. Each spring, the capital of China and its region are drowned in an orange fog for days on end. 270 million people suffocate. Dr. Wu Zhanwei monitors these storms from the National Desert Monitoring Center, which is connected to observation satellites and ground stations.
The sand dust comes mainly from land which has been destroyed in 4 ways: overuse, deforestation, lack of water, clearing of vegetation by domesticated animals. From 2001 to 2006, Beijing was struck repeatedly by sandstorms. In 2006 alone, in 1 year, we had 14.
By examining the dust which regularly falls on Beijing, scientists have found that it comes from deserts which are many hundreds of kilometers from the city. Deserts occupy a quarter of Chinese territory, but not all deserts produce sand dust. This comes from a few specific zones.
The sand comes mainly from 2 zones. From the north, Mongolian deserts and the Chinese province of Inner Mongolia. From the west, the deserts of Badanshahan and Tenga, close to the city of Longshu. We've put 39 control stations in place to monitor the sandstorms, like those at Longshu and Mingxin.
Longshu, the provincial capital of Gansu, was once an important step along the Silk Road. The city is 150 kilometers away from the Mingxin oasis.
This machine allows us to capture grains of sand. Let's open it and give me the pincers, please. Above are grains which have a diameter less than 100 micrometers. Below are grains which have a diameter less than 10 microns. Take the filters. Today is a very fine day and we can see a long way off. When there's a sandstorm, the landscape looks like this photo taken in 2013. Here's another from 2011, and this one is a photo taken in 2009. You can't even see the big building in front during this big sandstorm. You can't see the mountains. Up to 2013, we had violent sand winds 5 times a year and 1 sandstorm.
The sand dust, collected over the years at the Longzhou station, are stocked and classified according to their type and grain size. A series of identity cards is then made.
这些沙子都不一样，它们来自不同的。这是民情的。
The sand in these containers is all different according to the place it comes from. For example, this Minchin sand is extremely fine. It's very volatile.
被风吹起来。
The drier that a desert is, the more mobile is its sand, and the more it can feed the dust mass that sandstorms take with them. The zones where the dust is produced need urgent measures.
这张图中的紫色。
The pink color shows the great mobility of desert sand from the Tengger and Badan-Jayan deserts around the Minchin oasis.
程度啊。
Minchin is a strategic point in the war against desertification. The winds rise suddenly and are extremely violent. The oasis, where 300,000 people live, is caught between two great Chinese deserts, the Badan-Cheyenne and the Tengger deserts. The oasis forms a natural barrier between the two which must be preserved at all costs. If the immense mass of sand in these two deserts joined up, the flow of sand that falls on Beijing would increase markedly and the city would pay dearly for it. This possibility worries the Chinese authorities so much that they are closely monitoring the two deserts.
Check the GPS, we're getting closer.
应该快了。
We're nearly there, not far to go.
Let's carry on.
Very well.
With the metal detector, the team are searching for a marker.
Here it is, we found it.
Very good. Okay.
The marker consists of a metal plate placed here the previous year by Wang Bin's team with a recording made of its geographical coordinates. The current GPS position of the marker allows the length and direction of its movement since it was put in place to be measured.
50 meters, that's it.
好啦。
That's it.
Okay, we can see that the sand has advanced a bit more. This tower measures the advance of the sand. Here the wind speed can reach 20 meters a second. According to our observations taken over the years, 9.3 tons of sand fall annually upon this 50-meter tall, 3-meter wide tower. The two deserts of Tengger and Badan-Jayan have formed around Minchin. If we stop fighting against them, we run the risk that they will meet up. At Minchin, the sand front extends over 408 kilometers, and there are 50 sand corridors, which are entry points which the sand pours into.
The sand corridor of the mouth of the Tiger is 30 kilometers from the observation tower. It is one of the most formidable. The winds coming from the Badan-Jayan and Tengger deserts meet violently here, making the place sterile and dangerous.
Have you been in a sandstorm?
Yes, about a year or so ago. I was working in the fields, and all at once, I saw an immense wall of sand coming towards me. Sand flew, and I was completely blinded. If you'd been right beside me, I couldn't have seen you. In the provinces which are on the fronts of the deserts, sand and drought have forced many villagers to flee. Dongzhong, one of the villages of Minqin Oasis, has become a ghost town. The inhabitants have fled. Alone, old Wei and his wife cling on to their home.
Here it was full of life. There were lots of people, lots of livestock, like donkeys, horses, camels, cows and sheep.
Wei has only a few chickens left. The closest well is kilometers from here.
We've never had enough water. Before we dug wells to get water, the level began to drop, and in the 90s there was no more drinking water.
Intensive agriculture, with production targets dictated by plans, made things worse. The whole oasis of Minqin was soon short of water. More than 10,000 wells were dug. In a very short time, this led to the end of Lake Xintu, now completely dried up, a first in Chinese history. 200 years ago, Lake Xintu had a surface of 400 square kilometers. There were plants in the water, and the inhabitants could fish from boats. But because of population growth and overuse of water for agriculture, the ecological balance was destroyed. The lake dried up and from 1959 became sand dunes between 1 and 3 meters high.
The government forbade the digging of wells for agriculture and limited water consumption. Today, we use the water from great reservoirs and water from artificial rain.
The gigantic reservoirs which feed the oasis are fed in two ways: through the artificial rain program and by changing the course of large rivers. Seeding the clouds leads to the fall of what the villagers call artificial rain and limits the dry conditions.
The principle of artificial rain consists of sending substances which activate condensation in clouds where the temperature varies between -10 and -20 degrees Celsius. It's the zone where ice transforms into water. To make it rain, the condensation in this zone must be increased.
To send these substances into the clouds, China uses recycled military equipment: planes, artillery, and rocket launchers.
We started to apply this technique in 1958 to make rain in the province of Jilin. At first, planes transported salt to increase condensation in the clouds. Then they took liquid nitrogen. Nowadays, we prefer to use silver iodide, which works better.
On the 21st of July 1958, a Do-2 plane loaded with kilos of salt took off. It was the first time that our country had used artificial rain. We made a dozen tests. Even if some failed, others managed to bring water to the land. Chanli is responsible for the program in the town of Wuyi. Nationally, the program mobilizes an army which has 30 aircraft, over 7,000 artillery pieces, and nearly 5,000 rocket launchers.
Between 2010 and 2014, we launched over 600 rockets and fired around 10,000 shells from Wuyi. This shows the distribution of artificial rain systems from the town of Ruyi in the Gansu province. Nowadays, we have 63 work sites in this region, which is about 6,000 square kilometers in size. The red zone shows the rocket sites, the blue zone shows the artillery, and the green zone shows us where the reservoirs are.
It is estimated that over 300 billion tons of rain have thus been made over the entire country. This technique isn't unanimously approved by the scientific community. Some think that rainfall only increases by 20%. And the question of the toxicity of silver iodide and its effects on the ecosystem is raised.
Are you ready?
Ready!
Let's go.
In the village of Donjon, time seems to stand still. Old Wee distracts himself as much as he can by watching his grandchildren play with the rocket casings fallen after the last launch. When there are no clouds, artificial rain is not enough to fill the reservoirs, and rivers come to the rescue.
In 2010, we started to fill Lake Chintu by using water from the reservoirs. Today, we've managed to restore part of the lake. Following that, plant cover and the ecosystem returned. Humid zones and the water table were re-established. Thanks to this lake, we hope to stop the two deserts meeting up.
Will the restoration of the lake be enough to assure the future of the desert refugees who have been rehoused in model villages constructed at the center of the oasis? Bai Huiben is soon going to move to a new village close to the mouth of the Tiger.
We fought for years against the sand. And this is our new house. The whole village will soon move here. The house is more solidly built against the sand and has electricity and water. Life here is better and more comfortable.
Like all his neighbors, Bai Huiben could no longer stand the daily fight against the encroaching sand. Over hundreds of kilometers, an army of peasants are fighting to seal the breach of the mouth of the Tiger. Through this breach pours the sand which threatens to submerge the oasis and to annihilate it. Before, there was just moving sand everywhere.
Here in the Badan Desert, the sand moved fast and caused a lot of problems in this area. What did you do to improve the situation?
Beforehand, there was moving sand which flew everywhere, and we started fighting desertification in autumn 2008. We mobilized 1,000 people to stabilize the sand. The first step was to stabilize the sand with blocks of straw before planting. Up till now, we've planted trees over 6,670 hectares.
You've been working here 6 years?
Yes, since 2008.
You've done well.
To plant the trees, Dr. Liu Chuzong developed a new plastic mesh to block the sand, which was quicker to put in place than blocks of straw and very economical.
This mesh really stops the wind from moving the sand, as you can see from afar. With this method, there are no more sandstorms. Yongshu comes from the desert of Xinjiang. It's a type of tree which we've used at Minqing, using our institute's techniques. In the northeast and northwest of China, our technique with the Yongshu is also used.
The Gansu Desert Institute has experimented with over 700 different plants. It also uses the suo, which grows in the deserts of Xinjiang at the borders of Tibet. Highly resistant, the suo also uses little water and only needs to be watered when it is planted.
The so grow like this after 3 years.
The plantations of the mouth of the Tiger have worked. The sandstorms that threaten Beijing have diminished markedly over the last few years. On the Western Front, the Battle of Minxin is a first victory. To win the war, a program of reforestation launched in 1978 led to the plantation of 30 million trees, the equivalent of the land surface of Great Britain. And it will take several more decades of work to complete the Great Green Wall, which should protect Beijing. A second battle is being led on the northern front. This is against the sand dust of the Kupuchi Desert in the province of Inner Mongolia that regularly strikes the capital. The roads that cross the Kupuchi Desert are regularly invaded by sand. New plantation techniques are being tried.
Thanks to this solution, it only takes a few seconds for 2 people to plant a tree. In a day, we can plant up to 1,500 cuttings. In the past, there was only sand in the air. When it was windy, you couldn't even open your eyes, and you couldn't see the road. The Kupuchi Desert is the one that affects the storms that hit Beijing the most. Before, we had 70 to 80 every year. Today, after years of work, there are only 3 to 5. Beijing suffers a lot less. Beforehand, we only worked manually, without any machines. I didn't know how to plant trees. Often I'd dig a hole and the sand would just fill it straight up. In 2007 and 2008, we learnt how to plant using pressurized water. We put this straight to use and planted a lot more trees.
According to official figures, this new method gives a survival rate close to 85% compared to 55% in the past. The wall of young trees now stretches out for kilometers. Thanks to this, it has been possible to build roads across the desert which no longer become buried. And Mr. Chung never gets tired of watching the cars go by. The Great Green Wall is fragile, and only time will tell if it will be able to resist the pressure of the desert. In the urgency of the 1980s, trees were chosen for their ability to grow quickly and absorb greenhouse gases. Poplars, which should live 30 years, didn't survive.
Why did these poplars die? Because they require certain conditions to live. Water has to be sufficient and the ground fertile. So if the water table drops and it becomes arid, they'll die.
The calculation which led to favoring these types of tree which grow quickly in the hope of greater efficiency wasn't the right one.
That there is the local poplar, which grows very quickly, is tall and blocks the sand heading for Beijing. The downside is that it has quite a short lifespan. That's why we're cultivating instead Zhangzizong pine trees, like this one. They adapt to the sand, have a longer lifespan, and also hold back the sand from the storms. It's a very good type of tree. If just one type of tree is planted, there's a greater danger of sickness than if you mix two types together.
The great lesson that China has learned from its successes and failures is that there is no universal recipe for containing the desert. Each parcel of land has its own types of tree and techniques of plantation. The Great Green Wall isn't a monolithic monument, but a mosaic.
Come on, hurry up. We're still collecting the dead trees that haven't survived the aridity, the heat and the wind. Conditions are very difficult. We've planted several kinds of tree like Chungsu Song, woodland pine, Shentao, wild peach, and Shalu, sand willow. Shalu adapts best, then Shentao. For Chungsu Song, woodland pine, it's more complicated.
The tanker makes intensive watering possible when planting, but the water is very quickly absorbed. The solution is programmed drip-feed watering in the middle of the desert.
We water this type of pine twice a week during the first year. Then the second year we water it once every 2 weeks. In this zone there are around 200,000 pines.
The drip feed network extends for hundreds of kilometers. It's a heavy investment, but the results are there. The trees take root and wildlife returns.
We attract tourists who help planting trees. Our goal is to help people live in this desert.
The Chinese, businesslike, have exploited the entertainment possibilities of sand. They've opened centers in zones where the dunes are beautiful and the sand is good. Profits from these parks help to finance the ongoing gigantic greening projects. This has been a success, and over the last few years, parks have multiplied in the Kupuchi Desert and other duned areas. The clientele for the enjoyment of this type of recreation is estimated to be 100 million people. On holidays, crowds press to enjoy each attraction. Today at Kupuchi, with a road network crossing the desert, an immense hotel complex has appeared at the center of the desert. Kupuchi has become a model, and not just thanks to tourism. Rich industrialists have been able to build an economy on sand.
A good model is needed to resolve desertification. Following 27 years of research and experiments, we found a model that associates ecology, business, and the economy. Ecology is the basis, business is the guarantee, and the economy provides the motor.
The Chinese are now using sand for everything. It's a basic material for many products used in building. But more surprisingly, it's also used to grow medicinal plants, like kuqi and gansao, the Chinese aniseed reputed to be an elixir for a longer life. From plants grown on sand, new nutritional composites for animal feed have been created. Livestock, which is the main, if not the only resource for Mongol farmers, is undergoing profound change.
In the time of my parents, the sheep could graze in the steppe all year long. But for my generation, we can only leave them on the steppe from May to November. The rest of the time, from December to April, we keep them in pens so they don't eat the grass.
In May, when Moncré Lallet finally frees his herds from the pens where they've been closed up all winter, he only allows them a relative freedom. With his four-wheel drive, which has replaced the horse of his ancestors, he stops them from getting too close to the tree barrier. Unrestrained grazing is one of the major causes of desertification. In a few days, the hungry herd can eat all of the vegetation from a dune and give it over to the desert. The government has imposed very strict laws which govern the movements of the herds. In Mongolia, the isolated trees represent life's resistance to the desert. The oldest, those that have stood for hundreds of years, are called the trees of Genghis Khan, who is said to be buried at the foot of an isolated tree. They are the object of rites of devotion. This tree is over 1,000 years old. Today it is at the heart of a replanted area that was just sand a few years ago. This shepherd's house has been saved by Mr. Wong, the president of Ilion Industries, as a witness to past times.
This was the house of the Kubuchi Desert Shepherd 20 years ago. He lived in the middle of the desert. We can imagine how he must have lived here. I too was born in the desert. I have the impression that from my birth I lived in a world of sand, so I can understand the life of the inhabitants here. However, according to history, during the Han Dynasty 2,200 years ago, this was all green fields. In the Kubuchi Desert, there were about 10 to 20,000 houses like this one over an area of around 18,600 square kilometers. They were destroyed, and the inhabitants moved.
In Inner Mongolia, as in Gansu, many peasant families have been rehoused in recently built cities. Mr. Chong has also moved and says he is happy in his new way of life. He stars in an advert sponsored by Ilion Industries, which recounts the fight against desertification.
Look, there I am. He's called Chong Chiwa. The shepherds like to call him Chiwa, because they see hope in him.
I'm really proud of you. You're doing a very difficult job.
Chiwang, Mr. Chung's first name, means hope in Chinese. In the popular imagination, Mr. Chung has become the example of a peasant on the side of Ilion Industries.
You're famous now. You can read up there, The green dream of China is to transform this desert into an oasis.
We who are fighting the desert believe we can turn this dream into a reality. Some in the scientific community ask questions about the impact of these massive reforestation projects and ask whether it would not be better to put in place solutions on a smaller scale, more natural solutions. Parallel to the massive defense against deserts, the Chinese are also waging a technical and scientific war. At the oasis of Chaputu, on the western front in the Tengger Desert, natural techniques are being experimented which favor the development of substrata in the sand that help trees to grow.
50 years ago, all that was to be found here was moving sand. Later on, we helped crusts of sand appear to cultivate trees that were resistant to an arid climate. Thanks to them, the ground became solid, and lichen developed naturally. Lichen takes a while to get to the size of that one, which is 40 years old, but that's too long.
To accelerate the growth of the crusts and the lichen, scientists are now experimenting with the use of cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria are very ancient organisms which have contributed to the expansion of the forms of life currently found on the Earth.
This artificial method for the development of lichen is faster than the natural cycle. Nowadays, it only takes 1 or 2 years for them to grow. We apply this method to large areas.
At regular intervals, scientists take samples of diverse parcels of land to measure the speed at which the lichens develop. Cyanobacteria is perfectly adapted for rapid and abundant multiplication. They reproduce as filaments. These knit into large networks which, by forming a solid crust, stabilize the sand. The crust forms a substrata upon which the lichen develops more rapidly and flourishes when it receives water.
Lichen makes a strong contribution to good ecosystem development. There are several functions, such as the diversification of biology. It offers good conditions for insects. During our studies, we've seen that lichen serves as a food source for them at certain times of year.
During reproduction, the beetle needs a lot of energy to introduce its long and pointed reproductive organ. The female digs a gallery to lay her eggs in safety. Thus, through its reproductive cycle, the beetle contributes to the expansion and diversification of cyanobacteria and to the development of the lichen, which is the foundation of this ecosystem.
We hope to be able to spread cyanobacteria by mechanical means in the 3 to 5 years to come. For example, if planes or vehicles could spread the cyanobacteria, we could apply this technique on a large scale. Before, this was just moving sand behind me. Thanks to 60 years of work, this place has become a fine green oasis.
This first experiment with biotechnology in a desert environment is promising. Thanks to this, the railway lines of the Tengger Desert are protected against the sand that periodically blocks them, disrupting traffic and entailing constant and very expensive clearing operations. Now the trains can circulate freely over thousands of kilometers. Lots of other research is being made in the technical and scientific domain, and the adventure has only just begun. If, for example, dune movement can be predicted, communication routes and public works as well as villages could be built out of their way. For several years, a Chinese and a French team have been working together on this question in an experimental site a few dozen kilometers away from Chapoutot.
So here we're going to measure at our experimental site the advance of the dunes and the displacement of the sand so as to see the effect of different winds on the different structures that we've placed here.
Okay. It's very important for Chinese people to understand the movement of the sand dunes, because we know there are 60 million Chinese people living in the oasis, very close to the desert. So we can help the government to know where the best places to build the road, the city, for the sand barriers to protect and control this area.
We've taken a part of the desert and flattened it out so as to create the initial conditions from which the dunes develop, form and spread. Dunes can move in a direction which isn't the same as the wind, and so being able to anticipate the direction of spread of dunes is very important, as it allows us to say what areas will be covered in sand and will become desert.
The French and Chinese team have installed a network of cameras which take photographs automatically several times a day over a long period.
It's always a moment of great suspense. We're looking at the results of 6 months' work. This recording is very good. You can see clearly that the shape of the dune changes following the two winds, and you can also see the changing seasons and especially periods of snow and seasonal rains which stabilize the dune.
Filmed over a long time, the dunes no longer appear to be piles of inert sand, but mineral ensembles with their own life.
The grains, instead of being individual, well, they stick to each other with the rain and create collective behavior as well as these canyon-like landscapes.
The movement of the dunes sometimes produces a strange sound that is very musical. When it resonates, it seems as though the dunes are singing.
You see, and all along the face of the avalanche, multiple avalanches can be created. That means the dune moves.
In this frighteningly arid and deathly universe, as if by miracle, some islands of green remain.
Here we're in the middle of this great expanse of sand, and we can see a zone with vegetation, so there really is competition between the desert zone and the green zone. This is where the future of the desert is playing out. Finally, either the plants or the desert will dominate, and if the desert dominates, the plants will completely disappear.
The wind that blows upon the Tanger Desert is doubtless the worst enemy of the plants.
It's typically a wind from the northwest, a wind that comes from the interior of Siberia, a large depression which spreads outwards, and this causes the wind responsible for the sandstorms on Beijing. The sensors below there measure the wind every millisecond, and the sensors above, with the cups, they only measure it every second. We placed the box with the recording of data there less than an hour ago, and it has dropped very quickly because there's an enormous quantity of sand being carried by the wind. In this desert, the Chinese scientists didn't imagine that the dunes were of this type, and finally we managed to show that they were oblique dunes that formed an angle of between 75 and 15 degrees, with an average wind. Now we're capable of understanding the speed with which the dunes move and the direction in which they're moving. Our studies have allowed us to confirm that this desert, the Tenga Desert, is a reservoir of sand. This reservoir has a tendency to increase, and therefore that this desert has a tendency to spread.
The sandstorms that strike Beijing don't just drop sand on the city. They bring with them another menace, much more stealthy, which is salt. Lake Cheganur in Inner Mongolia is more than 500 kilometers from Beijing. Its waters have become so salty that the fish, once abundant, have completely disappeared. No boats sail here now. Beforehand, here, there was just water. How much has the lake lost?
The lake was 10 meters deep.
Has it lost a lot of surface area?
It has shrunk by about 40 to 50 square kilometers.
That's a big reduction.
Yes, because of the very dry climate.
There, that's a boat which was on the lake. But now, since the lake has dried up, the boat is stuck and it can't be got out. The ground, left behind by the drying out, is scoured by winds which blow incessantly. We're going to take some pH samples. How much do you think it is?
Very alkaline, around 10.
The sediments, which are mud mixed with salt, produce extremely fine dust that takes flight easily and is carried by the wind over very long distances. Excessive pumping has dried out more than one salt lake, especially in Inner Mongolia. Mr. Chung is convinced that the exposure of immense surfaces saturated with salt is a new source of storms. Back in Beijing, he recovers dust from vehicles which were in the street the last time the wind blew. This is the dust that was on my car.
We're collecting this dust to know whether it comes from the deserts of Inner Mongolia, the Tenga, or the Badenjahan deserts. It's clear where it comes from. According to our results, the samples from the Salt Lake and in Beijing are similar. When the wind blows on the Salt Lake, it filters the dust from the ground. The finest particles, salt dust, flies over the tree barriers and stays in the air. The larger particles stay on the ground and make up desert sand. We've taken a lot of action against the dust of sandstorms, and we've had a lot of success. On the other hand, we've done little against the dust from salt lakes.
For several years, with the support of the local authorities, Chung has tried an original experiment at Lake Cheganur.
Follow the other tractor at a distance of between 5 to 10 meters. After that, make a round, staying on the exterior. We're sowing changpeng seeds. This plant can reduce the dust quantity in the air to improve the environments of Beijing and northern Chinese cities.
Changpeng is a plant that grows mainly in Asia. It rapidly develops many bulbs on salt-laden ground.
Changpeng is a plant which can stand the salinity of the salt lake earth, and once it has developed, it stops the dust from flying by creating a mesh of vegetation.
During its growth, Changpeng becomes a fine red color. Thanks to the plantations of earlier years, Mr. Chung estimates the number of particles carried by the wind from Lake Shaganur have been reduced by half. As well as that, Changpeng is edible. If it is harvested, the money earned from its sale will considerably reduce the cost of its plantation.
For the time being, we're planning the putting into practice of this method in other places, at first in Inner Mongolia. Then we'll move to the west. At the moment, the state is validating its application on a large scale.
The war against desertification is still far from being won. It will require the mobilization of considerable financial resources to construct the Great Green Wall in the many zones that feed the storms, and will take a lot of time. But a new factor risks making the task even more complicated. It is now known that climate disturbance leads to the worsening of natural catastrophes.
The yellow zone indicates the movement of the storm, the 15th of April 2015. It's more intense than we've seen at Beijing for 10 years.
Desertification only exists in some regions of China, but it could have worldwide consequences. Sand, dust, and salt pulled from the deserts and dried up lakes of China reach high-altitude winds and fall in Korea, Japan, and even the United States. In this way, China's problem becomes the problem of us all.